welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang ends his 8-day Eurasia trip in Russia, with bilateral ties going strong. What's next for the two major powers? And American voters head to the polls to elect the 45th President of the United States. This year's election has been dramatic, to say the least. Have the divisive campaigns hurt people's faith in U.S. politics? And we begin today's show in Russia, where Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and his Russian counterpart discussed trade, business development, energy, and border cooperation. Our panel will discuss China and Russia's strong bilateral relationship, but first, this background story.
Boosting all-around cooperation. Russia was the last stop of Premier Li Keqiang's 8-day Eurasia trip. Li was in St. Petersburg for the 21st China-Russia Prime Minister's regular meeting.
Regular meetings of the governments have never been interrupted for the past 21 years. We always hold our meetings on the scheduled dates. And this is also evidence of the stable and dynamic development of Russia-Chinese relations.
We're
friends indeed. We have a similar approach to solving numerous global issues, take part in many multi-sided formats, including, of course, important platforms, and implement large-scale projects, including plans to combine the Eurasian Economic Union and the Silk Road Economic Belt.
Li signed over 30 deals covering a number of economic sectors, from finance to energy. Russia will start delivering natural gas to China through a new gas pipeline starting in 2018. More high-end manufacturing cooperation projects are also on the way.
China and Russia have been working on some new emerging industries that include new materials in aeronautical and space technologies. Regarding aeronautical and space technologies, 2 deals have been signed this year, and we're still discussing another deal to produce a 30-ton airplane engine together.
China's relationship with Russia is defined by a shared dedication to mutual. This year, the two nations celebrate 20 years of strategic partnership. Experts expect Li's visit to inject fresh impetus into China-Russian ties.
To discuss more about China-Russia relations with the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang's visit there, we are having in our Beijing studio Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir. Also, we would like to welcome from Moscow in Russia, Mr. Sergei Sandakhoev, President of the Russian-Chinese Analytical Center. Welcome as well. Shall I begin with you, Mr. Sandakhoev? If you could be brief a bit. The real nature of relationship between China and Russia, of course, you have this strategic partnership, but exactly what does that mean?
So, first of all, as we can say, this is the 21st regular meeting between our prime ministers. That means that this mechanism between Russian and Chinese government already insists more than 20 years, and it's very highly qualified, organized, and it's diversified on the all necessary items of the economic or social items, and regional and other cooperation. So that means that Russian-Chinese cooperation now is a very high level, and it's on the practical level, not just some political games.
I see. It's at a pragmatic level, as you said, sir. That's interesting, because if you look at the trade and economic ties, it does indicate to some extent that specific adjective you use, the China-Russia relations based on mutual respect, as they say, as well as win-win economic cooperation. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev says economic cooperation between Russia and China is meeting expectations. Take a look at this. This year, bilateral trade exceeded $40 billion. Moscow and Beijing hope to increase bilateral trade to $200 billion by the year 2020. What's going to contribute, Mr. Cui, to that $200 billion by 2020?
Yeah,
where's
exactly.
The growth space?
Yeah, frankly, compared with political trust and strategic cooperation, this economic trade cooperation between China and Russia is a weak point in the relations. Also, even we do have ambitious goal to reach a very, very high trade volume on the bilateral trade. But also, because of a very, very difficult environment, especially on the Russian side, because of sanction by Western countries and also the devaluation of the ruble. I mean, it shows that, especially last year, indeed, on the quantity, and we do have a increase of trade. But if it is exchanged to US dollar, very, very big job done. So yes, it gives a very, very big challenge to China and Russia how to reach a very ambitious trade volume goal in the year of 2020.
Right. Of course, at this moment, Mr. Sendikoev, your president, your prime minister is talking about the Eurasian community, hoping that could open a door for the future economic development of your economy. But in China, as you also know, there is another idea, Belt and Road Initiatives, OBOR, as they say, which is also covering very similar areas, Central Asia, going to Europe as well. What's likely to be the relationship between these two initiatives? Can they really cooperate? Eventually, this is blueprint. Are they really likely to bring us real cash, real development, and real potential?
I think it's very natural. Look, we are two big countries, neighbors. We have the longest border, more than 2,000 kilometers. And we can cooperate together, we can trade together without US dollars. We can make our accounting in our national currencies. So certainly that's why we are thinking about more deep integration processes. So these two ideas of the integration of Eurasian countries and One Belt, One Road politics certainly would be mostly interesting to coordinate those two ideas. And this is very natural. We do this now, and we arrange all necessary things to make it, even if it's necessary, to open trade zones and make it trade zones.
Right.
That means that Russia and China are ready to to provide all necessary workshop of this kind of integration.
Integration, political will is there. But the thing is, whether the business community are extremely interested in this, particularly, Mr. Cui, I have to point this out, that China and Russia are at very different development stage, even though they belong to emerging economies as a whole, but very different if you look at the nature of their economies and the potential growth spaces and their interactions with the rest of the world. So how should we approach this?
Yeah, exactly. We do have a very different economic structure. But I think now maybe we have a very good opportunity to make some more difference, together, and to have some common direction, which means that both China and Russia now we are at a stage of how to upgrading our economic structure. For China, we do need to export some more production or industry capability. And for Russia, as we know, with a very, very single economic structure of relying on energy. But of course now, according to President Putin and the Russian government, they want to have a comprehensive economic structure. So I think that's also the reason why now we are looking for integration between Belt and Road Initiative and the Euro-Asia Economic Union proposed by Russia side to have some more connectivity, have some more cooperation in manufacturing or some other industry sectors. I do believe we do have here.
That, of course, is about the economic trade, and strategically, of course, the two countries have never short of a momentum to build a partnership. Having said that, though, we've seen, Mr. Sendikoev, that there has been some complicated circumstances in the Asia-Pacific region, particularly in Asia, whether it's nuclear, whether it's territorial disputes, whether it's seeking a new order or new streamline of order in the region. On that part, what role does Russia want to play? As a result of that, what can China and Russia do together besides, joint military exercises, showing their consent together on some of the important things at the UN Security Council?
More than 4 years, Russia declares that we are going to develop Russian economy and to integrate into Asia-Pacific region through the development of Far East region of Russia. And certainly we are looking for China as our neighbor, natural neighbor, as a strategic partner for such kind of development. As you know, yesterday it was set up the already fifth intergovernmental commission, which is responsible now for the cooperation in the project development of Russian Far East and Baikal region and northeast region of China. So that means that we will coordinate and all our facilities to make this development more coordinate and more sufficient for both countries.
Right. On the one hand, Mr. Cui, China does have a very pragmatic reason to cooperate with Russia on many of the strategic interests points. But on the other hand, there's also the question that I mentioned earlier. China and Russia are being perceived by the rest of the world very differently. Also, very different development stage, very different even political systems. And there are many other differences between these two countries. That's natural born. So at this stage, strategically, how close do the two want to get together? And how close would be the best of the countries?
Yes, I think it's a question about the distance, as we understand. But I think firstly, because China and Russia, they are the biggest neighboring countries to each other. So I think it gives a very, very big requirement for both countries to have a peaceful and maybe harmonized coexistence between them. So if we look at this establishment of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and especially this very, very special partnership of coordination, we can find out firstly, both two big countries need to keep peaceful coexistence. And secondly, as we know, perhaps because of the force from outside, from other countries, I think give a very, very big momentum for those two countries to stand together. As we know, especially once the United States or some American people regarded China and Russia, both of them, as a threat to United States. The reason why I think that China and Russia, they regarded themselves as both of them as a positive or active force in the international community to keep a so-called strategical balance.
Interesting point over there. Of course, even reflected by the U.S. presidential election campaigns, Mr. Sendikov, you could see Russia is being accused for spying on the presidential campaign process and also on some of the there. While China, the China bashing in the U.S. presidential election has always been a practice every 4 years. So does the being perceived as competitor and even as enemy by some necessarily going to bring China and Russia closer together? How sustainable is that close, shall I say, relationship?
I know for sure that Russian-Chinese relationship is not against to any country of the world, certainly not also against the USA. We are developing our relationship as neighbors, and we are doing this, first of all, thinking about our own economies and our own people. So and we are open in this relationship, but this is the most important difference between what they are doing in, for example, Trans-Pacific Partnership or Transatlantic Investment Partnership. They are doing these partnerships especially against Russia and China, and they declared this. And when we are talking about integration processes and our relationship, our strategic partnership, We always say we are open for any kind of countries to join this partnership, and let's make common effective business and relationship to each other. That is the most important difference. So I will repeat that Russian-Chinese relationship is not against any countries.
And finally, before we go, gentlemen, we see earlier in our footage, the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang meeting warmly with his Russian counterpart, Mr. Dmitry Medvedev. These two countries have very strong political leadership. For example, Chinese President Xi Jinping, Russian President Vladimir Putin. So what kind of aspirations will these two prime ministers working together with the president be able to aspire to or achieve? That, of course, is a very important question. At their working level, what's likely to be the aspirations? Mr. Cui.
Yes, exactly, as we understand. Because those two presidents, I mean, Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi, they do have a very, very big idea on, especially we call it the top-level design for policy, for strategy. Certainly on the government level, especially between two prime ministers, they do have some more space to have some implementation of some of this, bigger design, especially how to have a concrete design for example, the railway, high-speed rail, and from where to where, and how could we do something together, just like I mentioned before, that to promote bilateral trade and some other. So yeah, certainly, I think that's also the logic of this cooperation, very efficient, effective cooperation between China and Russia. We do have governments with a very, very high capability of implementation.
Oh, I see. Mr. Sennekoev, we only have 45 seconds for you. Sir, your thought?
Sorry?
Your thought on...
25 seconds for what?
The same question that I addressed to Mr. Cui.
Oh, the same. Okay. I understand. Certainly, as it was told already, Russian-Chinese relationship, political relationship, is on the very high level on the geopolitical stage of the world. And certainly two prime ministers and governments, Russian and Chinese governments, should do everything to make our economical cooperation as the same highness as a political relationship.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing with us your insights on China-Russia relations. Cui Hongjian and Sergei Sennekoev. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you. Still to come in our program, American voters head to the polls to elect the 45th president of the United States. But have the divisive campaign hurt people's faith in U.S. politics? Big question mark there. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight, coming to you Monday to Friday every day on CCTV News. We turn to the United States now, where people across the country are headed to the polls to elect their next president. Our panel from the U.S. will discuss this year's dramatic election and what a Clinton or Trump presidency would mean. But first, this background story.
The final countdown. Americans from all 50 states and Washington, D.C. head to the polls today to elect the 45th president of the United States. The two leading candidates have finished making their final pitches to their constituents.
An America where we build bridges, not walls.
The corrupt politicians and their special interests have ruled over this country for a very long time. Today is our Independence Day.
Donald Trump's inflammatory rhetoric has encouraged a large number of Hispanic and Latino Americans to vote for the first time in this election.
One of the reasons for me to go out and vote is Trump's racist tone. I'm not into all that controversy, but an attack against Hispanics is an attack against all Americans.
But a victory is still possible for the Republican nominee.
The way the economy is, we need a businessman, and Donald Trump is the right person.
Trump and Clinton traded insults and became mired in a series of scandals during this year's bitter election campaign. A majority of Americans dislike both candidates. Some say they've lost faith in U.S. politics.
I voted for Hillary Clinton. Honestly, it was the lesser of two evils, which is terrible to say.
The hardest part was how partisan it was and how divisive this election has been, and I'll be happy if that can settle down. I'm not sure it will even after the end of the election, though.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump plan to watch the election results in New York. Their campaign stages have been decorated to celebrate a victory. Whoever wins, be it the first female president of the U.S. or a celebrity billionaire, this election is not only a choice between Clinton and Trump, but also a vote for America's future. The choice that American voters make today will have repercussions around the world.
For more discussion on the final day of U.S. presidential election, we are joined in Washington, D.C., Mr. Robert Moran, a partner at Brunswick Group consultancy firm and also former senior project director with the Public Opinion Strategies. Also in Washington, D.C., joining us, Mr. Clifford Young, president of Ipsos Public Affairs. In Iowa, we are having Professor Timothy Hagel, professor of political science at the University of Iowa. Gentlemen, welcome to the three of you. Have you already voted? Professor?
I'm voting at 2.
Okay. I've heard some very different...
I've already voted too.
All right, great. Thank you. And let's talk about it. You don't have to reveal your political identity, but now let's go into some details. Both candidates pushed for the final day. Will that have an impact on voters' decisions? Let's go to Mr. Moran first, briefly.
Well, I think Donald Trump has a narrow electoral path, and it's become narrower over the last 72 hours or so. It's Hillary Clinton's race to lose. She's winning or ahead in the popular vote, as most national surveys suggest. There are a number of tight states, however. Nevada, Florida, North Carolina could be very tight. And we'll see what happens.
All right. What do you think, Mr. Young? Final push, gonna bring out some votes, change the picture?
On the margins perhaps. I agree with Mr. Moran. It's typical in American elections to that final few days to push out the votes. It's all about turnout, and you want to get your people out to vote on Election Day. But I think the polling evidence is strong to suggest that the election has tilted towards Clinton. And for your viewers out there, I would say the following. Remember, in the United States, it's not a popular vote take all. Right. We have an electoral college, so the vote each state is really important. I would focus on 3 states, Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina.
All right.
For Trump to be competitive at all, he has to take all 3. So we might know very early on, when the polls close, which way the election's tilting.
Right. Our viewers around the world have been very well educated over the past 16 months, to say the least, about your campaign and your election system. Let's go to Professor Hagel. Obviously, both candidates seem to have certain kind of relief expressed in different ways for their final words. Mr. Donald Trump was saying, this is it, he was saying to the voters. Of course, he's trying to get the votes out. Well, Mrs. Clinton was suggesting, I've been working so fast the 16 months. This is what I really want to achieve. What do you make of this very mixed feelings, almost, of these two candidates? Some of the lowest campaigns in American presidential election history, and the longest, shall I say, also.
You're right. It's a very long campaign. It's very tiring. I think most people, even those of us that follow politics on a regular basis, we just don't realize how difficult it is, that their time is not their own anymore. That can be particularly difficult for somebody like, say, Donald Trump, who maybe has been able to basically determine his own agenda, his own schedule, whereas somebody like Hillary Clinton, that maybe she's used to that a little bit more. But it's a very difficult thing for the candidates. Of course, the one that wins is now going to embark on at least a 4-year journey that's going to be just as difficult for them, if somewhat different.
Well, we'll see also how the country holds itself after the election, but that shall we put it to another day for tomorrow. For now, let's still discuss this issue about who is going to get the biggest vote, whether it's electoral or just from the public. Does issues still matter during this presidential election? Let's take a look at some of the opinions and also stances coming from these two candidates. The two leading candidates have different stances on a number of key issues. On immigration, Clinton wants to give illegal immigrants a path towards citizenship, while Trump wants to crack down on illegal immigrants, as he said, and limit legal immigration, build a wall, for example. On foreign policy, Hillary Clinton supported the U.S. war in Iraq and wants to strengthen the U.S. military presence abroad, while Trump says U.S. allies should pay for their own defense. When it comes to trade, both candidates lean towards protectionism, quote unquote. Clinton recently turned her back on Obama's Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, at least to a certain extent. Trump says he opposed the idea from the very start. Do issues still matter? Professor Hagel, last moment at the decision of the voters.
I think they do to a certain extent, and certainly there will be elements of the population that care about particular issues, whether they're single-issue voters or not. The problem has been so mired in the personal aspects, whether it's the scandals of one candidate or the other, that it's hard sometimes for those issues to break through.
What do you think, Mr. Moran? Issues or personalities?
Well, since the advent of radio and television, American politics have become, generally speaking, more candidate-centered. And in American culture now, we've had almost a merger of politics and entertainment, which makes them more candidate-centered. However, I think issues still matter quite a bit. If you look at white, non-college educated voters, sort of blue-collar voters, the fact that Donald Trump has become more populist, more trade protectionist, that is a big issue. I think Donald Trump is wrong about that, and I think history will disprove his theory on trade protectionism, but that is an issue that he's used to quite some effect in the election. Issues do matter.
The demographic change is certainly happening in the United States. Mr. Yang, we see Mrs. Clinton, together with the Democratic Party, seem to attract a lot of support coming from non-white voters, and also from women, for example, and also from different kinds of people with higher education. But Mr. Trump, on the other hand, white male education no more than college. So what do you make of this democratic shifts going on inside the country? Is it going to be really representing the party demographic shifts, or these two candidates only?
No. The profile that you cited there on the Democratic and Republican side are basically discrete bases. Those are their traditional bases. I think the interesting thing looking forward a bit is to understand where the demographics are going. Excuse me. If you look at the long-term demographic data and the trends, we're increasingly becoming a non-white country. Indeed, 76% of older people are white, while the newest cohort of young people that were just born over the last few years, the majority of them are non-white. So obviously that changing demographics, which obviously favors the Democrats, is conditioning and changing the political landscape in front of us right now.
So is there going to be any dark horse this time, as they say, Professor Hagel? For example, Latino Americans, are they really likely to be the deciding force behind the election now?
Well, you can look at a variety of demographic groups and see how they vote. I think that sometimes there's a little bit too much emphasis placed on that, even though it is a fairly important consideration. Really, it's more a matter of the economic situation of whatever that group happens to be in, I think, is the key factor. And that's been that way for a number of presidential elections, that really it boils down to economics, pocketbook issues, as we say. But you're right, that certain groups, particularly Latinos, Hispanics, are a growing segment of the population, and they tend to get out and vote too. Right now, at least, they don't tend to favor heavily, or at least not as heavily as blacks, one party over the other. So that's why there is certainly a bit of an opportunity for the Republicans, but they need to at least embrace that opportunity and do a better job of reaching out to that group as well as others.
Okay, let's talk about some of the three states that the three of you keep on talking about, which is Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina. Okay, to help us to understand, likely to be some magic moves before we find the final answer, before the election comes to an end. Mr. Moran.
Okay, let me break it down for you.
Okay.
Florida is a swing state. It's very tight. Florida has early voting. Miami-Dade County, the epicenter of Latino voters in South Florida, has turned out at a record level, which would be good for Hillary Clinton, but the white vote has also spiked in early turnout. I think it'll go down to the wire, but I think it's Hillary Clinton's to lose. You need to look at Miami-Dade, the I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando, and also the I-10 corridor in North Florida, which tends to be more conservative. Ohio leads Trump. African-American turnout has been weaker across the Midwest, across the Big Ten industrial states. So I think that's an open question. I think Ohio likely leads Trump.
Right.
If it's really close and swings towards Clinton, of course, the race is over. I think Nevada is a very interesting test case to look at. Nevada is a lean right, lean conservative Republican state, has a lot of Latino population. 28% of Nevada is Latino. And turnout there has been extremely high in Las Vegas and Clark County. And if that's the case, then Nevada may already be out of reach for Team Trump, but we'll have to see. And then finally, North Carolina, I think, will be so close it could go to
Really? As close as that? Mr. Young, agree?
Yes.
As close as that?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Morin. I mean, it's a nail biter in North Carolina. Once again, just re-emphasizing, our polling shows and polling in general shows that probably Ohio tilts Republican. Florida is sort of a coin flip once again.
Right.
But really, really, for everyone out there, look at North Carolina. In my mind, if that goes blue, the night is over. And what's very interesting about North Carolina is that a few elections ago, it was a red state. It was a Republican state. And over time, over the last decade, a little bit longer, you've had a lot of migration from northern cities in the Research Triangle. So we have a changing state there, one that could go blue and really define the night tonight.
Professor Hagel, I wouldn't want you to go into details once again as the other two gentlemen just did, but help us to understand from your political science perspective that the few counties' choices will eventually decide the fate of America in terms of choosing a president. Some say to say the least, interesting.
It is, and again, it goes back to our electoral college system in that some states tend to lean one way, some states reliably tend to lean the other way, and then you have a set of swing states, and it basically gives each state an opportunity. Our system generally gives each state an opportunity to weigh in on the process, to not be overwhelmed, particularly by really, really large states like New York and California. Now, it just happens that also a very large state like Florida is a swing state as well, because the population politically seems to be evenly divided, or at least that there are enough people that are not tied to one party or another, the independents, that they vote not based on party loyalty but on who they see as the best candidate. And it's those people that the candidates have to convince, and sometimes they're convinced to one party's candidate and sometimes the other.
All right. Another thing that the rest of the world is extremely interested in is how could the polls be so different from one to the other? If I could just read out some of those to you. For example, the Reuters Ipsos poll you have over there, 90% for Clinton.
That's our poll, yes.
I know, 90% for Clinton. However, if you look at the New York Times, it's only 46% versus 42.9% for Trump. That's the latest I got. And also BBC poll, 48% vis-a-vis a little bit lower for Mr. Trump. So how could the polls be so different from one another? That's the first question. And can we still rely on polls anymore? Mr. Morin, I'd like you to go first. I'd like Mr. Young to prepare for himself. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Morin.
Okay.
Sure. So if you go to, if you visit large poll aggregator websites, you'll see that actually the polling is very similar. There are not nearly the wide shifts that you might expect. So, for example, Hillary Clinton leads in 9 of the last surveys. If you go state by state, most states show a clear tilt in the polling, just by studying the last, say, 10 to 15 states. But a critical thing to understand about polling is pollsters are working very hard to attempt to model the universe of voters who are either early voting or will show up on election day. We do not have mandatory or compulsory voting in the United States, and so turnout levels vary, and it becomes the challenge is having a good sense of who will or who will not show up. And depending on how you model the electorate, you may move that vote share a couple points either direction. But I actually think the polling at the state level and national level has been quite good.
Okay, there we go. And what about you, Mr. Yang? Your turn now. Explain. 90%.
Yeah,
for
well, I
Miss
agree with.
Clinton.
A little bit that number, but I agree with Mr. Moore. And the best thing to do, we're in this new age of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of polls. Indeed, there'll probably be something like 20,000 polls conducted during the electoral cycle this round. In 2012, it was about 12,000. So lots of polls. So what you should always do is take the average of all the polls. That's the best thing to do. And the average is about 5 points for Clinton. Now, you lead for Clinton, and that's a pretty solid lead, and that's been the case for the last week or so.
Right.
When you cited the Reuters Ipsos poll, actually that 90% is 90% probability that she'll win, right? We were forecasting the probability of her victory, but we believe the vote share will be about 5 points in her favor, just to clarify that. But indeed, I think the polling, we'll see, we'll have probably a pretty good cycle. Obviously, there always could be some sort of surprise, and per Mr. Morin's point, it's always about turnout. So if you look at Brexit, the reason the polls got Brexit wrong is that we got the wrong sort of people. We modeled the wrong sort of people on election day. So younger people didn't go out to vote, and older people did. And so what have we done here in the United States? We've done a lot of, as pollsters, a lot of sensitivity analysis to understand what's going on, and we're comfortable with the 5-point lead.
Okay, and before we go, very important question. This campaign, as we all understand, has been one quite dramatic, to say the least. Professor Hagel, what about the result of the election? Will one candidate or the other candidate refuse to accept the fact? Will there be more drama before we lead to the final result of the election? And how would the country react to that? Are Americans ready for that? And how are we going to see the result? Is it likely to be early result as long as the 3 states are being deciding their votes? Or this is likely to be a very dirty, long battle until the very end?
Well, that's what we have to wait and see tonight, because if some of those states like North Carolina and Florida and Ohio are very close, or if they tend to go for Trump, it could be in for a long night. If it seems right away that Florida has gone for Clinton and Ohio is maybe goes for Trump, but North Carolina goes for Clinton, then it's probably be an early night. And the real key as far as accepting it is how close the race generally is. If all of a sudden it ends up that clearly you've got that 5-point lead as suggested for Clinton, then that will be pretty clearly that a victory for her. 1 state or 2 states that are closer than that, it probably won't stop people from accepting a Clinton victory. And we'll have to see what Trump does. He's a lot of talk, and maybe we'll see he'll go ahead and say, well, I can clearly see that I lost. We'll see what happens there. But on the whole, if it's a very close night, then yeah, we could be in for a late night, and there could be some challenges if in fact North Carolina, as the others indicated, was a toss-up. And so we just have to wait and see. And the system really isn't perfect by any means, and so that means when you do have a very close election, it can cause some trouble, but hopefully that won't be the case.
All right, very briefly from the others, Mr. Moore, and of course Mr. Trump has always been saying the system has been rigged from time to time. So the danger is whether he's going to accept the result if it's not in his favor.
Look, if the elections in some of these key swing states, Florida, North Carolina, Nevada, etc., are close, I can see Donald Trump not conceding. I think there's a chance that he just simply doesn't concede at all, that he lawyers up and tries to take legal action that would not be outside of his character. I think that would be deeply harmful to the United States and its process. But the U.S. has a system designed to take a lot of these things, and I think we'll be okay.
Okay. Mr. Yang, final words from you, 20 seconds if you can, sir.
Yeah, I think no matter who wins, they're going to go into a divided, polarized government. And what's the real meaning of this election? We haven't talked about it. Kind of 30,000-foot view. A supermajority of Americans believe the system is broken, that the rich are getting richer, that believe that traditional parties and politicians don't represent them, and that isn't going away.
Right.
And so that will still be here to stay. There'll be a heightened degree of populism, and I believe uncertainty looking forward, even after Election Day.
That's a long battle ahead, to say the least. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us on the Election Day. Thank you so much, Clifford Young, Robert Morin, and Timothy Hagel. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. And thank you for voting and also expressing your political views. Thank you. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type World Insight CCTV News into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again tomorrow when we have more analysis about the U.S. presidential election results tomorrow. Bye for now.